All right, so we are going to start with talking about, so we're going to have some positive examples and some negative examples and see how we can relate and learn from each one. So we're going to first start with Naomi and Ruth. We're going to jump all around a lot in the scriptures, but I have them up here, at least paraphrased, so hopefully you guys can stick with it. Feel free to turn or just look at the screen. So in Ruth 1, verses 16 and 17, it says, but Ruth replied, "Don't ask me to leave you and turn back." Oh, so to give some context, Naomi lost her husband, so she was with her two sons and their wives. And then when her sons passed away, it was just the three of them. And Naomi was trying to send her daughter-in-laws home to be with their families since they didn't have, none of them had a husband to take care of them. So Naomi is trying to convince them to leave, and Orpah, the other daughter-in-law, eventually gives in and goes home. But Ruth replied, "Don't ask me to leave and turn back. Where you go, I will go. Where you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us." So she refuses to leave Naomi. And then later on in Ruth 2, we see Boaz recognizing Ruth's faith and commitment. He says, to paraphrase, "I've seen what you have done and I've heard about you." And then in verse 12, he says, "May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you have done." And then Ruth 3, to summarize that section, Naomi gives Ruth instructions on how to present herself to Boaz, because Naomi wants Ruth to have a forever home and not just be wandering around and being taken care of. So in verse 5, at the end of that, Ruth says, "I will do everything you say," and chooses to obey Naomi and to listen to her advice. So what we learn from that is that Naomi doesn't force Ruth. Naomi was trying to send Ruth home, yet she chooses to stay. Ruth chooses that faith for herself, not because her mother, in this case mother-in-law, forces her. So because of Naomi's unwavering faith in the midst of struggles, it's attractive to Ruth. She wants that for herself. So when we think about them, what in Naomi's life made Ruth want her God? And we can reflect on that in our own lives. What about a mother's life would make her daughter want to follow God? So we see her faith during suffering and her persistence, even though she was going through hard times. And that relationship between Ruth and Naomi led Ruth to trust Naomi's judgment and to listen to her advice. And to follow her God, because she could see that it was genuine. So next, Jochebed and Miriam. In Exodus 2, we see this story of the birth of Moses. So at the time there was a decree, from an Egyptian decree, saying to kill all of the baby boys. Yet we see Moses' mother, or the baby we later know as Moses, his mother she sees something in the child, and she chooses to disobey the decree and to just trust God with her baby and just give the baby to God. So then specifically in verse 4, we see it says, "The baby's sister then stood at a distance watching to see what would happen to him." So her daughter was watching over the brother. And then the princess sees the baby, and Miriam is there to help protect him and say, "Here, I'll get a woman to nurse the baby," and is able to help with her quick thinking to save her brother's life. Later in Exodus 15, let's see, where is it? 15. So it says, in verse 20 and 21. Then Miriam the prophet, Aaron's sister, takes a tambourine and led all the women as they played their tambourines and danced. So we see Miriam is a prophetess, and she is a worship leader. And the way we know that Miriam is the sister, or we can assume it's the sister. We don't know 100%, but later it does in Exodus 6. It confirms, it says that Jochebed is the mother of Aaron and Moses. And we do see that Moses was watched by his older sister. So we can assume that in that case that it was Miriam. Let's see. So Jochebed models courageous faith under pressure. So she doesn't just go with the decree. She trusts God and just gives away her baby. Not just giving her child to God, but she gives that baby away and puts the basket in the river and just trusts God to take care of him.
Oh,
And
I know that part of,
I know.
we watched like a movie.
We watched a movie with that? Yeah, Prince of Egypt, that's right. That's a good one. So, and then Miriam observes this. I have no idea what those notes mean. It's shaped. So say shaped, sorry. So Miriam observes this and sees how her mother is living, and then it shapes her life by what she's seeing at home. So not only as a child, but later we see her becoming a leader and worshiper herself. So it multiplies. Her mother's faith multiplies through her. We also can tell that what kids see lived out at home, not just what they're saying, but how they live their lives, makes a huge difference in the child's life. So something to consider. What is your child learning from how you handle fear, difficulties, and pressure? It's a very convicting question, because they're going to learn from us either way. And so we definitely want it to be a positive example. So if your child copies your spiritual life, where will it lead them? Even more convicting question, personally. So I think of Kristen in this, in that even through everything they've been facing in the past year or so, her faith has become even stronger, and she praises through it and worships, and she's doing all that in front of her family. And it's just so contagious that that's what her children see, and that's how they are going to follow, because they see that modeled in everyday life. And it's not just in the easy times, easy to say, but even through the struggles, they get to see her faith through that. So it's just an amazing example to look at.
For all of us.
Exactly. And not just as a mother, but in any situation. So quickly to go over Lois and Eunice, it is Timothy's mother and grandmother. So Paul, in 2 Timothy, Paul is writing to Timothy and saying, I remember your genuine faith, for you share the faith that first filled your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice. And I know that same faith continues strong in you. So we're seeing that getting passed from generation to generation, and other people, even Paul, are able to see that. So not just within the family, but outside of that family, that faith is pouring out and visible. And then in 2 Timothy 3, Paul is saying, but you must remain faithful to the things that you have been taught. You know they are true, for you know you can trust those who taught you. You have been taught the Holy Scriptures from childhood, and they have given you the wisdom to receive the salvation that comes by trusting in Christ. So we see that he had a very trusting relationship with his mother and grandmother, and he was able to learn from them not only just the Scriptures, but to trust what they had to say, and he had to have that relationship with them to really draw from not just the Scriptures, but from their hearts as well, to have that trust in Jesus as he did for the women in his life. So faith passed through generations, like I was saying. And then the consistent teaching at home. So it wasn't just them living their lives. He was taught scripture. And it says they have given you the wisdom to receive the salvation. So they aren't able to provide that salvation, but they are able to provide the building blocks for that, the base knowledge that will get him there later in life. And again, the close, trusting relationships. It's definitely, you're not going to believe someone if you don't trust them, and you're not going to believe the things that they're teaching you. So, are you intentionally teaching scriptures in your home or assuming it will happen elsewhere? I think oftentimes we become complacent in assuming that they're going to learn it at church and children's church and when they read their Bible and all of these things. But we really need to be intentional about the things we're teaching our kids. And not even just young children. So I actually heard recently at our Tuesday Bible study that I go to, a woman was saying that her adult children, she has a group chat with them, and she sends them devotionals each day. And at first they kind of rolled their eyes at it, but now it's gotten to the point where because she does it so often that if she's busy in the morning and doesn't send it till later in the day, they're asking for it. So even as adults, she's still able to pour into them and feed them scriptures. And it doesn't have to just be your biological children. It's all the children, people you're discipling in the faith. All right, so now to some not so great examples, but we can still learn from them even if they're a negative example. So with Herodias and Salome, let's see. In Matthew 14, we see the story, I think many of you are familiar with, of, let's see, let me find the scriptures. At Herod's birthday party, Herodias' daughter, Salome, does a dance, and it pleases Herod. And so he vows to give her anything she wants. And then we see, if we jump over to Mark 6, verse 24, she asks her mother, "What shall I ask for?" And Herodias says, "The head of John the Baptist." So back over into Matthew, the king regretted what he had said because he had vowed in front of his guests to give her what she had wanted. So John ends up being beheaded, and the head is brought on a tray. So as a positive thing, first the negative. So Herodias actively encourages and coaches evil in her daughter. It's not just her seeing her life, which she saw as well, but when she asked for advice, she encouraged evil to have John killed. So Salome follows her mother's lead, and even goes to her mother for advice. So we see that in other relationships as well, like with Naomi and Ruth. Naomi follows her mother's advice, and here we see that again. She's following her mother's advice. She's looking to her mother for what to do. And influences can be intentional and destructive. But I think oftentimes it's not that obvious. I don't see any of us in here asking for someone's head on a platter. So we have to be conscious about even little things. So are we ever encouraging wrong responses? Even indirectly, not telling them to do something like bring them the head, but just through our words and actions and our reactions to things, either to them or how they see us handling things in our lives. Are we coming home from work and talking about a coworker in a way we really shouldn't be, or anything like that? Like, how is our life going to impact them, and what way are we leading our children? And what about the subtle things? Like I said, it's not always as obvious as with Herodias and Salome. What subtle things, pride, bitterness, resentment, are we displaying in front of our children, or even to our children, that are actually influencing them? So Jezebel and Athaliah. Let's see. In 1 Kings We see Jezebel promoting Baal worship. She influences her husband to evil. Let's see, 1 Kings 21:25. No one else so completely sold himself to what was evil in the Lord's sight as Ahab did, under the influence of his wife Jezebel. In 2 Kings, we see Athaliah learn that her son was dead, and she destroyed the rest of the royal family. She was doing it to seize power, just complete destruction for her own gain. And then in Chronicles, 2 Chronicles 22:3, Ahaziah also followed the evil example of King Ahab's family, and his mother encouraged him in doing wrong. So it's her entire sphere. It's not just her children, it's everyone around her. It multiplies. Just like we saw with Timothy, it passed down through the generations, but it also was seen by Paul and all those around that he was pouring out into. So her entire sphere was influenced by her evil, not by positive. So her wickedness spread to future generations. And Athaliah not only followed her example, but escalated. It multiplies. Do we want to be multiplying evil, or do we want to be multiplying God's kingdom? So, like I said, it multiplies if it's left unchecked. So what patterns in your life, if repeated, will lead your children away from God? Are there any areas where we need to break a generational cycle? We see on both sides, good or bad, as being passed down through generations. Is there any area in your life where you really need to just give it to God and let Him reveal to you the areas where we need to improve, so we're not passing those things on to our children? And not just our children, but all of those around him or around your entire life. So, as we can see, parental influence is undeniable. We see it multiple places, not just in what we've already read, but in Exodus 25, at the end, it says, the entire family is affected, even children in the third and fourth generations of those who reject me. Proverbs 22:6 says, direct your children on the right path, and when they are older, they will not leave it. And this also reminds me of the 1 degree off that I had showed on the PowerPoint a while back. What way are we directing them? Like, even that 1 degree off can end up far away, but are we doing something completely opposite and directing them towards evil and not along the path? But I did hear recently a cool example that I liked, and that God's kind of like our GPS. So even if we take a wrong turn or going in the wrong direction, what does it say? It says recalculating. No matter what we choose in our lives, He can correct that and get us to where we're supposed to be going. So we just really need to rely on Him to get us there and direct us and help us direct our children onto that right path. Children take the direction they see modeled, not just what we're telling them to do, but how we are acting in our lives. Like I said, unless God intervenes. So that's breaking those generational cycles of sin. We need to reflect on which positive things we are already doing and continue to multiply those and move away from the things that are going to lead them away from the path. And that's not only for us, but also for their future lives. So that when they are older, as it says in Proverbs 22:6, when they're older, they will not leave it. So the best part, in my opinion, is that God works through imperfect families. We see Naomi was bitter in Ruth, yet God used her. And I love that. That yet is so encouraging to me, because none of us are perfect, yet God uses us. He can use us fight all of our mistakes and our challenges and redirect us onto that right path. So Lois and Eunice, it tells us in Acts that they lived in a mixed faith home. So things at home don't have to be quote unquote perfect. Go sit down, please. Go sit down. Thank you. To be able to be used by God. He's not looking for perfection. He's looking for genuine faith and for obedience and for someone to use. So all we have to do is just humbly submit to be used by God and just show our genuine hearts, and he will get us there. So faith is not inherited, it is caught. Through examples, those that we see around us. Through a genuine and passionate life in front of our children. So I see this in Naomi, where Ruth chooses to be with her because of her faith and her passion and her loyalty to God. And that is shown through Ruth as well, passed on. And then I see it in Kristen as well, just that same love for God, just in front of your kids, the way you live your everyday life, and it being passed on to your children. And then through intentional training, teaching the scriptures, like Timothy's mother and grandmother, teaching them the way to live the right life. So Timothy being taught from childhood. Proverbs says to train up a child in the way he should go. Ephesians 6, bring them up in the disciplines and instructions of the Lord. Deuteronomy 6 through 7. These commands, impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk the road. And it continues on and saying more things. So it's not just a one-time thing on Sundays or a prayer here and there or a lesson that you are teaching them. It's constant repetition and meditation. And another thing I heard recently, this woman was sharing that when she was a kid, she was in the car with a friend's family, and the mother was driving and said, "Wow, thank you, God, for that beautiful sunset. You are such an incredible artist." So not just praising him when you're sitting down to do your prayers and your worship, but just in everyday moments and using that language throughout your life really impacted her. She remembered that conversation from when she was a child in the car with friends. Just that one sentence, being able to use it all of the time. And so in Deuteronomy 6, 20 through 21, let's read that one. So it says, in the future, your children will ask you, what is the meaning of these laws, decrees, and regulations that the Lord our God has commanded us to obey? 21. Then you must tell them, we were Pharaoh's slaves in Egypt, but the Lord brought us out of Egypt with his strong hand. So we're not just teaching them rules and this is how you should behave based on what the rules say. It's also about what God has done for us, not only in the scriptures that we see in telling the stories of what God did in Egypt, but in our own lives. So, for example, like what Egypt is he removing us from? Like what's our Egypt? We have to tell the whole story. Patrick had sent me, when I told him what I had wanted to talk about with mother-daughter duos, he had sent me some notes from a video he had watched of Greg and Lisa Popchak. I don't think I watched the same exact video that he did, but I did watch several interviews with them. And I think he's mentioned it recently as well, talking about how they had done studies and that 85 to 90% of Christian children raised in Christian homes leave the faith by 18. And if you do the math, if 90% are losing, that's 10% staying. But then that generation teaching their children, if only 10% are staying. And it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So what are some things that we can do in our lives to help influence our children? And we saw a lot of that in all the stories that we just saw. So connected, I'll just share a few points of what it said, and you guys can definitely highly recommend watching their content. They also talk about marriage and other relationships as well. So warm, connected family relationships. Timothy learned because of the trust. Faith lived at home. We saw that with Miriam following her mother and becoming a worship leader. So parents who model authentic faith, Naomi followed, or Ruth followed Naomi because of her authentic faith. So practicing together as a family, balancing rules and grace. If all we do is say, these are the rules and these are the things that you have to follow, it's going to push them away. Legalism isn't going to work. But also, if we go too much on the grace side of things, it goes too far. So gentle parenting was mentioned last week, and it actually, believe it or not, started like maybe 30 years ago in this very context of a godly relationship with our children, and offering grace. But when it goes too far, when you're just being gentle for gentleness' sake, not trying to create that relationship with your children, it doesn't balance. You have to have the moral guidance for them, but also that forgiving grace that we have to model in our lives. So meaningful involvement in church, so them feeling like they are part of it, not just something that you're doing. Teaching faith that encourages the real world. It has to be relevant. It can't just be stories from a long time ago that we feel so disconnected from. We have to bring it into today and show them that we can use it in this world today, not just for the people who are living in biblical times. And also modeling strong marriages and healthy family relationships. How we handle things within the home between our personal relationships affects how they're going to handle relationships outside of the home, with their future spouse or coworkers or any relationship that you may come across. But the main thing that they point to, not only relationship and discipling our children. So it's not just, they compare it to a vending machine. You're not just pushing buttons trying to get the outcome you want. You have to build a relationship with them and really disciple them. It's not just a code that you're putting in to get an outcome. And every single step of the way, and some of the other stuff they said as well, every single time, it's give it to God. Lord, I have no idea what I'm doing. Please help me. Every single thing. And that can be applied in anything in our lives, but definitely with children. And they said, as well as with spouses, but God gives us the children that we need. So they help us grow in ways that we would not in any other way, because they're going to challenge us, and that's the way that God's going to stretch us, is through the people in our lives.
Welcome.
Thanks, buddy. You're mini me, so. But yeah, so homework, you guys have homework. It's just the questions that I have from throughout the slide, if you guys want to take a look at and really examine them. No, Judah, pass them out to people on this side, and Harlan, do you want to pass out? No? Okay, Levi, can you pass them out to this side, please? So it's just the questions that I had throughout the slides, but you don't necessarily have to do, like that, for example, the first one, what about a mother's life would make your daughter want to follow God? You can definitely change that to what about my life would make others want to follow God. So you make them more applicable to yourself. But like I said, the keys is cultivating those relationships and just giving it all to God. Thank you, buddy.